You're listening to Edge of Faith, a multimedia magazine where we discuss art and culture through a Christian lens. So Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us tonight and talking about your new book, Compassion and Conviction. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. Excited about this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess we should just go ahead and jump straight in. And I'm going to start with a great question that I pulled straight out of the foreword of the book. And the question was, what is our relationship between my Christianity and my politics? So before we really get too deep into the conversation, I was hoping you could answer that question.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think for Christians, our faith impacts everything in our life. So it's not just how we interact within the four walls of the church. It's not just how we interact with other believers, but how we engage the world, how we engage society. And I think politics presents us with a robust way to love our neighbor. And I think our faith should impact how we go about politics. That doesn't mean that Christians have to agree on every single issue, but it does mean that we need to bring our positions and policies that we support through biblical scrutiny to make sure that it's something that fits within a biblical framework.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you completely. In the book, and accurately so, you address that we live in a fallen world and that our politics, or in our political parties anyway, are affected by that as well. Everything's affected by that. It's, imperfect and ugly, for sure. So what are we to do since politics is intertwined in everything we do?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big points that the book makes, is that for better or worse, politics touches every segment of society, from what we can eat, from whether we can meet and go to church, right? We've seen that as of late. To what our children learn in school and what constitutes a crime. These are all things that affect our daily lives, and not only our daily lives, but the lives of our neighbors. And so it's something that we should care about because it's, as we said in the book, it can be a matter of life or death. It can be a matter of imprisonment or kind of freedom. And so we want to make sure that we're weighing in, mostly because we care about human beings, because we know that we're all created in God's image. And we want to make sure that everyone's dignity is being acknowledged and everyone is being treated to a certain standard. And I think politics, again, presents us with a real opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. Edge of Faith is putting out this 2-part series on politics, which we usually don't do much with politics, that is. But it seemed like a really important issue due to the fact that, from what we see, that a lot of Christians, do disagree, but for some reason they've really intertwined their faith and their politics like you can't even really separate them apart, and it seems to cause the division in the church as well, which is really inappropriate. So, with the same question about, you talking about it's a fallen world and the political parties, suffer from that as well. In the book, you guys talk about, how parties do distort our Christian walk, and that both parties, show examples of that. So I was hoping that maybe you could discuss maybe one example of how both parties affect our Christian walk in maybe less positive ways.
Sure. So in the book, what we try to do is provide Christians with a framework for engaging politics. And we start with the compassion and the conviction of Christ. So as we make our decisions, we should be doing so based off the compassion that Christ showed, right? He tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves. He even tells us to love our enemies. When we make decisions, we need to have that in mind, that compassion of Christ in mind. And we also need to have biblical doctrine in mind, right? There are certain guidelines and the design that God gives us in the Bible, and we would need to remember that also. And so we think that the combination of the compassion and conviction is how Christians should start to think about politics. To not just think about justice issues, although that's very good, but also think about morality. Not just think about morality, but also think about justice. Those things are not in conflict. They're actually interdependent. And so I think if we were to start with the left and progressives, I think what progressives get wrong in many cases is the conviction side of that, right? Their love sometimes seems to exclude the truth, right? It's almost that if you love someone, then you affirm anything that they do. And that's not the love of the gospel. The love of the gospel is being compassionate towards people, seeing their human dignity, but not necessarily affirming them in something that they're doing wrong, or affirming things that the Bible just says are not right. And so we can see this in whether it's the abortion conversation, right? We should have compassion for women who have crisis pregnancy, absolutely, but we should not come to a place where we are saying abortion is okay because of that. On the other end, if you talk about conservatives, I think sometimes they get the compassion side of that conversation wrong. And so you see the morality, you see them talking about morality, but you don't always see the love within their politics. Are we showing love to immigrants? Are we showing love to minorities? Are we fighting for justice? Yes, we need law and order, but we also need justice to be a part of that law and order. And that's where I think both sides can get it wrong. But Christians, I think, have the key to balancing those out and making sure those things work together.
I think you handled that beautifully. Yeah, there's definitely direct line issues that are straight from the Bible and things that are not really addressed that way. We have to learn how to see those things and walk in Christ, exactly like you said. That's wonderful. So I've got a statement: separation of church and state. Boy, do I see that statement misunderstood all over the place. And as I was reading your book, I saw that you guys explained that beautifully. I loved the explanation, and you took a lot of time and were very thoughtful with explaining it. But I was hoping that maybe you could briefly explain to listeners what that phrase really means.
Sure. Yeah, we spent our whole second chapter, and I'm an attorney, so I'm with you. It's one of those things that I hear over and over, that is just misconceptions about what church and the separation between church and state means. And so we did, again, spend a whole chapter on this issue. Number one, people have to understand that the separation between church and state, that phrase is not in the Constitution, right? The Constitution talks about making sure that there's an establishment clause, which means the state or the government should not establish one religion as the main religion, right? And then it also talks about making sure that people are allowed to exercise their faith. But the separation between church and state as a concept does not mean that people shouldn't apply their faith to the issues of the day. Because the fact of the matter is, there is no law that's created without somebody applying their values. Laws are created through values. And so we should apply our values to the issues of the day. If we're not applying our own values, we're simply applying someone else's. Now, what we shouldn't do is coerce people into practicing every tenet of our faith, right? We should tell people no one should be murdered. We should protect people. We should protect human dignity. But at the same time, we're not going to say that people need to go to church. We're going to force people to go to church every Sunday. That's not how Christianity works. So we're not trying to set up a theocracy, but the idea that people shouldn't apply their faith, and not just Christians, others, that people shouldn't apply their faith to how they do politics, it's just false. And some people don't know better, and others know better, and just are kind of misleading people.
Great. Thank you so much for that. We've covered a lot of information pretty quickly. And now that we have all this information, where do we go from here?
That's a good question. I think we have to engage one another, and in doing so, we have to make sure that our political affiliation isn't becoming religious in nature. And that's why politics can seem like it's so divisive among Christians, because the problem is that we've allowed our identity to be in our party or to be in our ideological tribe. So when someone insults the Democratic Party, Christian Democrats get upset like they're being insulted. But that's not always the case. I think every Christian, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you can be in that party, that's fine, but you need a level of separation between your identity and your party participation. People should be able to critique your party or critique your ideological tribe or critique a politician that you support without you feeling like you're attacked. And that's one of the main ways that you can tell whether you've been kind of indoctrinated by the party or whether you have a healthy separation. I am a Democrat, but I would hope that you would be able to critique, if you honestly critique the Democratic Party and say there's some issues with it, I should be able to say, you know what, brother, you're right, because we serve a higher standard, and I know the Democrats can't reach that standard, and when they don't, I'm going to hold them accountable for that. And when Christians start holding their party and their ideological tribe and the elected officials that they support accountable on their side, I think that's when we begin to see improvement. But right now, a lot of Christians are really focused on protecting their side, trying to maintain a perfect narrative instead of holding their side accountable.
Well, wouldn't that be nice if Christians walked out into the public square and actually forced both parties to get closer to a higher standard, which would probably bring it to a point where there were minor differences instead of polarizing divisiveness, right?
Yeah, we could, you and I may always disagree on the marginal, on the tax rate. But there are a lot of things that I hope that at some point we can focus on all the common ground that we have, right? The things that the Bible speaks specifically to. So we should be able to come together and advocate for the poor. We should be able to come together and advocate for the unborn. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, that shouldn't matter. Those are things that the Bible speaks directly towards, and we as brothers and sisters need to be able to come together on those things, but we can't do it when our identities, again, are in our party.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting closer to the end of the conversation, but, as in the title of the book, Compassion and Conviction, the AND Campaign's Guide to Faithful Civic Engagement. I was hoping you could tell the audience a little bit about the AND Campaign.
Sure. Yes, the AND Campaign is a Christian civic organization, and we're trying to put the compassion and conviction of Christ into Christian politics. We want to make sure that Christians aren't primarily in what I call the politics of Christian self-interest. We think that we're primarily supposed to be in politics to protect human dignity and to promote human flourishing. So we want to raise civic literacy for Christians. We really are a resource for Christians to learn more about politics, to learn more about civic engagement in a very nonpartisan way. We try to do it in a gospel-centered way. And also we want to help Christians apply their values to the issues of the day. Too often Christians allow, again, their political party to frame the issues for them. But as an attorney, I can tell you that if an issue is framed the wrong way, then there can actually be two wrong answers instead of one right answer. Yeah. And so I think a lot of what happens in our politics is we're presented with two wrong answers because we've allowed other people, non-believers, and people that don't understand the righteousness and justice of God to frame the issues for us. And I think we really need to take the time to do that. And this book, Compassion and Conviction, helps Christians frame it from a different point of view, from a more biblical point of view.
That's wonderful. Justin, thank you again for taking the time to talk with us and share some of your ideas. And, I'll be praying for you. I think this is it's a great movement to help Christians, just walk in Christ, and that maybe people can love each other a little more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and hopefully we can talk again.